Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo encounter stories. First story by you/I Merciless Void. The time I saw a Wendigo. First things first, this happened to me when I was around 10. I've lived in Idaho all my life and spent a lot of time outside or in the wilderness as a kid. My grandparents would take me camping and my older brother and I would always hike up whatever trails we could find to get a view of the sunset. On one of these occasions, something terrifying happened. We were up at a campsite I only know as Warm River, the river there never freezes over, and my brother and I were on a regular evening hike. There was an old tunnel bored through the mountain at one part of the trail, probably an old train tunnel, and we were walking through it when I heard something I'll never forget. After walking through probably 2/3 of the way through the tunnel, I heard a terrible screech at the end we entered through. The screech wasn't like anything I've heard before. I've heard the screams of animals on dark and windy nights, I even think I've heard Bigfoot calls a few times, but never the metallic, grinding screech I heard that day. The point is, whatever the sound was, it did not sound natural in any capacity. I probably jumped 5 feet in the air when I heard it, and my brother shouted a few choice curses before shooing me quickly to the exit of the tunnel. At this point, my brother decided we should just continue walking and head back after whatever made the noise hopefully cleared out. We didn't have any firearms on us, so I was pretty upset. My brother reassured me we would be fine, and we made the walk back without incident. However, I didn't get any sleep that night. Whether it was the thing that screeched at us or just my imagination, I heard things moving around the campsite the whole night, as well as whispers echoing through the darkness outside the trailer. I woke my brother up a few times to check out what it was, but he refused each time, telling me that it was probably just other campers staying up late and enjoying themselves. The rest of the trip was pretty normal. We packed up the following day and my life continued as normal. I was disconcerted but chalked what happened up as a harmless event that I must have been exaggerating in retrospect. A few weeks later I went up to Pine Basin, an old ski lodge my family rented each year for family reunions. Here I would mess around with my cousins, our favorite activities being night games. We would play hide and seek, a game called Ghosts in the Graveyard, and other games like that. On one instance, I was chosen to be the seeker for a hide and seek game. Because I was one of the younger cousin, I got a flashlight as an advantage. Normally, all the younger cousins hid close to the lodge and the older cousins hid in the nearby trees or at the base of the nearby mountain. As I was searching near the bottom of the mountain, I heard a familiar whistle up the mountain a bit. We would always whistle as a hint at our locations. It sounded like someone was hiding way up near a tree known as the underwear tree, you can guess why, so I began trekking up toward the whistle. As I climbed closer, I got an uneasy feeling in my stomach. I continued on wearily, and convinced myself that I would be fine. I hated walking in the night alone, but figured whoever I find would walk me back to the lodge. As I neared the tree, I noticed that it was deathly silent. This alerted me that something was very wrong, because you could always hear the adults having fun back at the lodge. I was anxious to hurry back, so I called out, "I found you, Scott." I thought the whistle was my older cousins, "Come back down with me." I got no reply, but I wasn't planning on waiting. As I began walking back down the path, I heard a voice call, "You almost had me," so I ran back up to investigate. I flashed my light in the branches of the tree, and saw a monstrosity that was not my cousin. It looked like a poorly drawn stick figure made into a human with its emaciated figure and lifeless eyes. I remember its face looked like the skin on its head was being pulled from behind, it had torn and stretched features. As soon as I saw the creature I screamed, dropped the flashlight and ran back to the lodge. The entire time I ran I was overcome by an overpowering smell and I could hear the thing running after me. As I approached the camp I saw a few people, my cousins, at the bottom of the mountain waiting for me. I was crying and shaking and they took me inside. I told my dad what happened, but my cousins all said they didn't see anything following me. The adults kept us inside for the night, and I kept hearing sounds drifting in from the mountains. I never played night games after that happened, and was always terrified that my cousins wouldn't listen to my warnings. Ever since that night I have always felt uneasy up in those mountains. I used to be really religious and figured it was a demon of some kind trying to kill me or something like that, but those mountains have never felt the same after that incident. A few years ago the game, Until Dawn, became really popular and I watched a walkthrough of it on YouTube. When the Wendigo first appeared in game, I got chills down my spine. It was exactly what I saw, and I did a ton of research on them. I figure someone must have gotten snowed in at that old lodge and resorted to cannibalism, but that doesn't explain what happened at Warm River. I still hear that screech from time to time. It never occurred to me until watching Until Dawn that they might be from the same thing, and it scares the hell out of me every time. I heard it earlier tonight, and that's why I decided to finally write my story down. Wish me luck. Second story. This story was shared by you/Dr. Alwayscared. The Wendigo is near. This is a story which happened to me and my friend a few years back. I work in a national park as a park ranger. When my life was relatively normal, I had just landed a job at a national park. Life was good as I was working with my buddy Rob. The second day was strange. We found bear traps on the ground. We never put them there. Other than that, another day in paradise, but throughout the night, I swear I heard a loud screech coming from the woods near my watchtower. I looked and saw nothing. I just shrugged it off after a little while. As of lately we have been finding small animal corpses around the woods. This is normal since we have bears all over, it's just that these marks were too big to belong to a bear. What's even weirder is we found a tooth inside of a bloody deer. This tooth was too huge and sharp to belong to a bear. I think we have a new animal in these woods. Today we found a bear, hanging from a tree and gutted. I nearly threw up. No animal in the park could do this. Boss told us from now on to stay at the watchtowers. I kept being reassured that everything would be fine, but at this point I just couldn't be too sure anymore. Lately the screeches have been more frequent. I'm having trouble focusing. When I was younger, I was told of a creature that fed off people and animals. It could also mimic voices. It was called a Wendigo. Of course I don't believe in that paranormal crap, but something was taking out animals throughout the park. I swear I heard Rob call me from outside of my watchtower. He yelled, "Hey Trent, you have got to come see this." I nearly left, but I just felt that his voice was off, nearly distorted. I looked out of my watchtower, to see Rob, his insides dangling in the breeze. My boss ruled this out as an accident. That still didn't stop the police from questioning me. I know I heard his voice. I saw something in the woods. Let me explain. This creature I saw had huge antlers, an animal skull as a mask, and it was over 11 feet tall. The night began normally, until the screeches began again. I looked down, only to see this creature, eating my boss's lifeless body. I got a good look at it before it ran off and out of sight. The police have been very suspicious of me lately. How could they not be? Both of the people I worked with are dead. I tried to explain what I saw to the police. Of course nobody believed me. It all led to me being terminated. I've decided I'm not going to let this creature ruin my life. I have done research on this Wendigo. I plan to break into the park tonight. I will end this, I must. I'm in the park, I hear the screeches and I am following them. I hear the voices of my boss and Rob. They are telling me that they are okay and I should come meet them by my watchtower. I know from my research that the Wendigo creature is really good at tricking people. I just kept wandering around the park. I was wondering, until I heard my mother's voice, she died when I was 6. My instincts told me no, but I had missed her so much. Don't worry Mom, I'm coming. Third story. This story was shared by you/Emma Cameback. The Wendigo loves you. People always talk about how the Wendigo is so evil. Which sounds like a funny thing to say, people always talk about it, but what I mean is, when the Wendigo is being talked about, he's portrayed as a malevolent being who couldn't care less about the lives of human beings. The implication is that the Wendigo doesn't like to socialize. You couldn't be more wrong. The Wendigo is utterly fascinated by other people, their thoughts, their feelings, what makes them tick. He'll ask questions other people won't think to ask, and he'll inhabit bodies others have tossed aside. I met a woman earlier today, an ordinary day until she knocked on my door. She was an older woman, over 60, with messy gray hair and a smile that suggested a much younger age. She said her name was Doris as she grabbed my hands, looking at me with pleading eyes. I asked her what was the matter. Doris claimed it was vital she speak with me. She said she believed she had been sent here by a higher power. As I stood blocking the door, I asked Doris what her religion was. Not a mainstream one, she said. I won't preach to you about the afterlife or what it means to be a good person. We both laughed at the same time, the same old lady cackle. A harbinger of things to come, I guess. I invited Doris in, instantly liking the woman. She sat at the kitchen table while I put on hot water on the stove for tea. All I had was Earl Grey, from when my girlfriend comes over. I reached into the shelf where we stored our tea and took out 2 bags of Earl Grey. Milano cookies too. Doris asked if I had a philosophy for my life, and I hesitated, clandestinely wiping some stray crumbs off the counter. I couldn't understand why, but I really cared what this woman thought of me. I don't know, I said. Live and let live, I guess. As long as no one is hurting me or my family. Doris nodded, an odd smile on her face. Her face seemed like it started to melt then, skin dripping like candle wax. Are you okay? I could hear the sound of my own voice, but it sounded far away as the question escaped my lips. Doris acted like she didn't even hear me, and she began talking about an alternative religion that would let me carve out my own path. And even if I walked my own path, I didn't have to do so alone. She wondered if I knew about the grace of the Wendigo, a great power that seethes in all of us. Doris grew antlers and eyes as red as a blood moon. I saw that playful smile on her face, suggesting hundreds of years of wisdom. I could tell by the grin that she, the Wendigo, liked tricking people. It was a gentle kind of deception, the kind that made you feel good. You laughed afterward when the joke finally clicked. I looked at her face. More melted skin fell from it and landed bubbling on the wooden table. I felt a little dizzy but pleasantly so. We talked some more, about philosophy, life, and religion. I realized then that there was no difference between these concepts. One lived as one believed. I believed that the Wendigo had my best interests at heart. Its trickery amounted to harmless play, and if you think about it, that's how friendships are forged, through fire and the twisting of flesh for some conscious purpose. I felt such a deep connection as I stabbed her neck. I cried. I thought about how she had changed my life, opened up my mind to new possibilities. I enjoyed our conversations, which branched out into many, infinite conversations. It was as though I had known Doris for years. A mentor that had faded away because of my omnipotent hand. The old woman became a husk, a skinless lump in the middle of the floor. Lit candles encircle her corpse, and I'm sipping Earl Grey tea in her honor. I'm sitting here, wearing the skin of Doris, my friend. Such a surreal feeling. If you don't believe me, try it out for yourself. But be warned. You'll never experience anything like it again. The immense spiritual pleasure dissipates eventually, but the lifeless wrapping remains. I never had a true friend until I met Doris. Now I'm watching the Wendigo devour her like a rabid dog. With each finger consumed, I'm losing my connection to her. All the neat things we talked about, gone like the wind. I'm hearing whispers, faint echoes that prove to me our conversations actually happened. The Wendigo is my friend now, even if it's from a distance. He can be your friend too. He loves you. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/spoopy_hollow. Unidentifiable 10-foot-tall creature spotted in Lebanon, Maine. My sister and I were driving to a haunted walk in Lebanon, Maine called Destination Haunt, and while in the town trying to find the place we drove onto this really old dirt road called Lord Road from the east. At the time we turned onto the road it was day and the sun was out. As soon as we started driving down, the sky turned near black like night as if the sun was setting and a fog engulfed the road. We quickly started joking about how this is like one of those wrong turn roads in those horror movies where a group of kids get lost in the woods and never leave. It added to the effect when we drove over a old wooden bridge suspended over a river. My sister acknowledged the narrowness of the road and asked how two cars could fit traveling in opposite directions. I joked, well, no one ever leaves this place. In Maine all you see are fields of trees for hundreds of miles at a time. But the trees on this road looked unusually different. They were all collectively old and had the color sucked out of them, their branches and bases curved in usually zigzag patterns unlike conventional trees that grow in a pattern to get the most sunlight. I drove a few miles until I had enough of the massive puddles and decided to call the place we were trying to find. They told me that their location was miles away on the west side of this road and to turn back because the east side was flooded and we should enter the west end entrance located on the other side of town instead. We turned around and saw a moose walking across the road, very normal in Maine, but right behind it was a 10-foot-tall black as can be two-legged and unnaturally slim creature running unnaturally fast across the road. My sister screamed, it looked like Slender Man. Only it had huge black jagged horns and had no apparent bodily features or shape to it. It looked like a 2D cut out of an unnatural human. When we drove by where he ran we looked into the woods and saw it standing on two legs next to the moose. It leaned over in a hunchback manner and started walking around on all limbs, and there were others just like it emerging from the mist. We drove the hell out of there hoping my engine wouldn't seize from the huge-ass puddles, but on our way back we saw two abandoned buildings with old cars from the 50s and 60s that rotted into the earth. Those houses were not there before when we originally drove down. The creepiest part was when we got back to the main road because the sun was almost set and the sky almost pitch black. When we pulled out of the road the sun reappeared, the sky readjusted to day as if nothing ever happened. Later that night I looked at Google Maps and the road was completely different on there, filled with things that wasn't there when we driving, and all the houses looked new. After telling a few people about it, someone told me that Lebanon, Maine is known to have a lot of strange paranormal stuff happen and that there is even a self-proclaimed witch fortune teller who lives there. Has anyone here experienced something like this? Fifth story. This story was shared by you/Sugavin. There is something unexplainable in the forests of Oklahoma. The United States is, no doubt, a diverse land of many different forms of life. From the fierce grizzly bears in the mountains of Alaska, to the stealthy alligators in the swamps of Florida. Wherever you may be, there is always something unique about your state. That is until you get to Oklahoma. You see, Oklahoma is without a doubt, one of the most boring places, maybe, ever. Having lived here for 18 years, I'll be the first person to tell you that. Sure, there are large cities, just like any other civilization, however they are spread out over tens, even hundreds of miles apart. What you are left with in between those cities is what some refer to as the sticks, or the boondocks, or the country, whatever you choose to call it, and that is where I'm from. In the sticks it consists of four main elements: lots of trees, lots of crops, lots of wildlife, and the occasional Walmart or Dollar General. Since there is not a lot to do out here, that is where most Oklahoma residents take up the pastime of hunting, and that is where my story begins. It was a cold November night, right in the heart of deer season. I was laying in bed enjoying a video game I was playing, when there was a knock on my bedroom door. It opened, and my dad walked in. "Hey kid," he said. "Yes, Dad. You haven't been hunting this season yet, why don't you take my bow and I'll get you set up, and in the morning you can head out there, and go kill us something." Wow, he's really putting me on the spot here. I thought to myself. Yeah, sure, why not? I said to him. He told me to dress warm and to meet him outside by the front door in 10 minutes so we could walk out to the spot, so I would know where to go when it was time to leave tomorrow. We began our walk into the woods. With every step we took, I began to get a little bit more annoyed. Where are we going? I thought we were just gonna go behind the house. I didn't know we were gonna have to hike to the hunting spot. Damn, what was I thinking? I should have just said no. When we finally arrived at the hunting spot, we were more than a mile out into the wilderness behind my house. He finally stopped by a huge oak tree and pointed his flashlight at some cedar trees that were off to the side. "Do you see it?" he said. "No," I replied. He walked closer and shined his flashlight into the trees, to reveal a tiny chair that was hidden under some tree branches and sticks. "That is where you're gonna set up in the morning, got that?" I nodded my head as he tossed out some dried corn, to attract the deer in the morning, when I came back. "What time do I need to head out here?" I asked my dad, expecting him to say 6 to 7 a.m. He then muttered, "You need to be up and ready to head out by 4 a.m. My heart sank, it was going to be pitch black outside. There's no way I was going to be able to make it all the way out here in the pitch black. We finally made it back to the house by 11:30 and I headed up to my room, to get as much sleep as possible before this hunting trip. I awoke to the painful sound of my alarm blaring into my dark room. I looked at my phone and it was 3:40 a.m. I sighed and sat up. I put on the warmest clothes I could find and made my way out into the living room. There on the couch sat my dad's bow, 2 arrows, and a small but sharp hunting knife. I grabbed the gear plus a flashlight and made my way out the front door. Navigating the woods at night was an extremely frightening experience that took much longer than what I would have wished. I left my house at 4 a.m. and I did not arrive at the hunting location until 4:37. I was impressed with just how many trees I managed to walk into and how many times I almost tripped over large logs, even with the help of my flashlight. Once I arrived, I sat down in the little uncomfortable plastic chair and began waiting. My dad wanted me out here so early because it makes it a lot easier for the hunter to sneak into his spot and the deer not being able to watch him. I'll never forget the paranoia I experienced in those woods, in the pitch black. The feeling of not wanting to breathe too loud because something or someone might hear you is like no other. After roughly 15 minutes of sitting in the quiet darkness, I heard it. Sticks snapping and leaves crunching. It was a deer walking to my spot. My heart began to pound as I listened closer. The leaves continued to crunch with each footstep, but that's when I picked up on something strange. Is this thing walking on 2 legs? I thought to myself. It sounded just like a pair of human legs walking through the leaves. Is it my dad? I thought. Maybe I forgot something at the house. Surely it has to be him. But no, it couldn't have been him. The footsteps were coming from the woods, not the trail we walked. The footsteps emerged from the woods, and stopped. After a short pause it took 1 step towards me. A moment later it took 1 more step in my direction. I began to get nervous. Deer shouldn't be acting this way, what the hell is this thing? I raised my flashlight up from my lap, and in a moment of pure bravery and stupidity I clicked my flashlight on. What I saw in front of me still haunts me to this very day. In front of me stood a creature no shorter than 10 feet tall. It stood on 2 legs. It was covered in black fur. The face was human, I believe. The face looked to be of a man's face. The eyes were closed and the mouth was contorted into a sinister grin. It had 2 great big antlers that seemed to come off of an elk or a moose. It had hooves for feet, and its arms were long and skinny but had what appeared to be claws on the end of its hands. As soon as I saw this thing, I clicked off my flashlight, praying it didn't see me. Too late. I almost started gagging from fear when I heard this thing sprinting at me. As fast as I could, I loaded an arrow and drew back the bow. Without hesitation I fired the bow into the darkness, hoping I could hit the creature, but I missed. I heard the arrow whistle off into the woods before striking a tree. Shit. Stupid idea. I thought. I immediately stood up and began sprinting down the trail. The creature was in close pursuit. I ran faster than I knew I could down this trail. When I was almost halfway home I began to naturally run slower because of fatigue, and that's when it swiped at me. It hit me directly in my right calf. I stumbled and fell off the trail and into a nearby ditch. Once I fell in I could immediately feel the warm blood begin to start gushing out of my leg. I quickly tore off my hoodie and wrapped it around my leg as a temporary tourniquet. However, my bleeding leg was the least of my worries. The creature jumped down into the ditch with great force and began swiping at the ground, hoping to hit me. Luckily the thing landed about 20 feet away from me, so I had some time to spare. I hurriedly pulled out my flashlight and threw it behind the creature. Upon hearing the flashlight hit the leaves it turned around and began swiping at the ground once again. As quickly and quietly as possible, I crawled out of the ditch. On my way out, I heard the creature begin to make a clicking noise from its mouth. Now I can't confirm it, but I assume that noise was the creature using echolocation to find me. If this thing is blind, how did it see my flashlight back at the hunting spot? I thought. Then I realized I had to click my flashlight on, and the creature probably heard that. Despite now knowing it was using audio to track me, I still ran to the best of my ability out of the woods. The thing didn't follow me out. I made it home and crashed through my front door, bleeding all over the place. My parents took me to the ER to get stitched up. They asked me what happened and I told them what happened, but of course they didn't believe me. They assumed I fell while walking through the woods and tore open my leg somehow. And after a while I began to think the same thing. Maybe I was sleepwalking and fell, maybe I was hallucinating, who knows, is what I used to tell myself. I almost forgot about my experience until today. My dad went out hunting and was supposed to be back 3 hours ago. Me and my mother began to get worried. I walked out my front door. I planned on going to look for my dad, and that's when I heard it. Screaming. I don't know if it was my dad's or if it was just a wild animal, but we called the police anyway, and as I type this, I can hear a faint clicking out by the woods, and if I look hard enough, I think I can make out a human face, looking up at my window. Please, if you are ever in the forests of Oklahoma, be extra quiet. You never know who or what is going to hear you. 6th story. This story was shared by you/Dark Night Tales. I used to be a park ranger in the Adirondacks. I think we're all in trouble. It was close to 3 in the afternoon when the knock came on the door to the ranger station. I was mildly surprised to hear it, given that it was early January in the foothills of the Adirondacks and the temperature was hovering at a balmy 12 degrees, with wind chills driving it into the negatives with frustrating frequency. The wind had been howling against the isolated station since before sunrise that morning, and I wondered if I was going to need to deal with any damage to my little abode after the storm blew through. I'd been monitoring the forecast and weather radar all day, and it looked like I was in for quite the blizzard by the time evening rolled around. It had been snowing most of the day already, but so far it hadn't been very heavy. I expected that to change by nightfall, however, which, in January, was only in another couple hours. I didn't usually keep the front door to the ranger station locked, since it wasn't uncommon for hikers and campers to make a pit stop on their way up the trail to the observation areas, either to log their camping site for the night or just in hopes of a nice hot cup of coffee before they continued on their hike. The door hadn't been latching correctly lately, though, and had the tendency to swing open when a strong gust caught it just right, so I'd been keeping it locked until I could repair it. The knocking was light, somehow hesitant and almost polite, if that makes any sense. It was so quiet that I almost didn't hear it over the whistling of the wind and creaking of the station. I'd been in the middle of composing an email request for a new generator, as mine had been acting up a bit lately, and had to pause my typing and listen intently to ensure I'd even heard it in the first place. When it came again, only a bit louder, I pushed back from my desk and took another sip from my steaming mug before walking over and opening the door. Outside stood 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed in what looked like expensive and very new cold weather coats and snow pants, all looking very similar except for the various bright colors and all bearing the familiar North Face logo. Their anxious faces peeked out from within their drawn and cinched hoods, and I had to suppress a grin. They looked dressed to climb Everest, not hike the lower trails of the Adirondacks. Tourists. Probably European and probably their first time seeing this sort of weather, I thought. It was a fairly common occurrence. Folks from all over the world came to visit these mountains, looking to experience all the beautiful wilderness we had to offer. I wasn't unsympathetic. If you weren't used to the unpredictable climate here in the winter, it could quickly catch you by surprise and get dangerous very quickly. "Hi there," I said cheerfully, stepping back into the doorway and motioning them inside. "Come in out of the snow and warm up by the fire." The man who'd been knocking turned to his companions, said something in Spanish, and then turned back to me with a wide grin and nodded, stepping past me and into the warmth of the station. The rest followed quickly, anxious to get out of the chill wind that was blowing hard outside. As soon as they were all in, I closed the door again and locked it to make sure it didn't blow open. "Gracias, sir." "I am Martin," said the man, pulling back his hood and unzipping his quilted down coat. He gestured to the others in turn. "This is Lucas, Diego, Sofia, and Triana." I nodded my greeting to each. Martin continued with a smile. "It is very cold. We come to visit USA from Spain, to see your beautiful mountains and enjoy the lovely scenery." His accent was very heavy, but his English was far better than my Spanish, so I didn't have much room to criticize. "But it seems a storm is coming and we fear there will be too much snow." "Unfortunately, we are not so prepared for that." I nodded, patting him on the shoulder as I moved past him and opened the door leading to the shelter room, reaching in and turning on the lights. "That's certainly true, my friend. I'm afraid we're in for a bit of a blizzard this evening." "Bad time for a winter stroll through the mountains," I said. "Fortunately, we happen to have enough space for you and your friends to make yourself at home and wait out the storm. My name is Jackson Turner, Ranger. There's coffee over there on the table, and bunks and a comfortable sitting area in here." When the group just stared at me blankly for a moment, I got the feeling I'd lost most of them somewhere along the way. Instead, I just offered the friendliest smile I had and gestured to the room. At that, they all grinned and nodded their thanks as they quickly shuffled past me, dropping their packs on various bunks and beginning to remove their cold weather gear. I made sure they all got something hot to drink and that they understood they were welcome to stay until the weather had cleared before returning to my desk. They all seemed very pleasant and grateful for my assistance, and they drifted from my thoughts as I continued my administrative work. It was another hour before the second knocking rapped at the door, this one slow and oddly arrhythmic, almost a staccato beat, somehow unsteady and not as tentative as my other guests had been. I sighed heavily and straightened, heading around the counter and back over to the door. I hadn't had any visitors to the ranger station in a week or more, and now they were pouring in like this was a Holiday Inn Express or something. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, putting on my official greeting smile once again. In the doorway, shoulders and hooded head covered in a layer of icy snow, was a man of roughly my height, about 6 foot or so. Unlike the others, he wasn't dressed in fancy, color-coordinated cold weather gear, but instead wore a mismatched combination of clothes, like he had raided the bargain bin at a second-hand expedition store. His pants were a blue quilted nylon and looked more on the expensive side, even if they didn't exactly fit him very well, but his coat was fur-lined and looked like it was made of padded wool, layered over an old fleece jacket. His boots looked newer and not too warm, something more suited to a summer hike than a winter in the mountains, I thought. "Hey there," I said as warmly as I could, waving him inside. "Come on in out of the snow." He didn't say anything, but gave the slightest hint of a nod as he walked past me. The strong scent of musky body odor followed him, and I wondered if he was one of those reclusive hermits that I'd heard rumors of, living out here all by himself in some makeshift shack. I closed the door and locked it again, turning back to the man. He'd already taken note of the bunk room to the left, where the Spaniards were getting settled, and he headed on in and sat on one of the empty bunks in the back corner of the room. He didn't remove his coat or offer any greeting to the others, and I noted with some curiosity that he didn't have any sort of pack with him, which further made me wonder if he lived nearby in some off-grid cabin. I could see that the others were smiling and making pleasantries towards him, but he just sat there, dark eyes quietly watching the activity without a single word. There was the slightest hint of a smile upon his lips, incongruous and somehow unnerving. It only took them a few moments to abandon their attempts at including him in conversation and turn back to their own group, speaking quietly in Spanish amongst themselves. For a moment, I wondered if he might be in some sort of shock. The temperature was dropping pretty quickly outside, and it had already been too cold for some of the clothing he wore. I considered giving him a quick once-over to make sure he didn't have any frostbite or signs of hypothermia, but something about him told me he might not be so welcoming to my attention. I stood there in the doorway to the bunk room for a minute, looking over the scene. Something about the newcomer seemed off, somehow. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the way he moved, his lack of communication, the way he was just sitting there perfectly still on the corner bunk, just seemed strange. There was something else, too. Something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something that tickled the back of my consciousness, just out of reach, more an instinctive unease than coherent thought. I found myself hoping the man would spend a few minutes warming himself and then be on his way again. Turning my attention to the others, I realized that they must have found something odd with him as well, as they had all subconsciously clustered around the end of the table farthest from him and were speaking more quietly than before, more subdued. I noticed them periodically casting quick, uncomfortable glances in his direction, but never for more than the briefest of moments, as if they were just reassuring themselves that he hadn't moved and was still sitting there. I also noticed curiously that none of them sat with their back to the man, likely also subconsciously. I was just about to walk over and talk to him, to shake the odd feeling away, when Martin appeared in front of me, his brow furrowed. "Sir, my friends and I are worried about the other campers," he said. This drew my attention. There weren't any campers registered to be out here today. Was the newcomer one of them? Maybe they were in trouble. "What campers?" I asked with a frown. He motioned vaguely to the north. We passed their campsite on our way to the observation point, before the weather turned us back here. Maybe a half-kilometer up the trail, in a clearing beside a small brook. He cast a quick look over his shoulder at the stranger sitting in the corner. There it was again, I thought, that same unease. Martin continued. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. They had some of those cold weather tents set up and seemed to be well prepared for the storm, at least as far as we could tell. We stopped and warmed ourselves by their fire for a bit. They seemed very experienced and were not concerned about the cold, but I am no expert. Well, it sounds like they should be okay, I said with the best reassuring smile I could muster. They should have checked in with me, but if they're as prepared as you think, I'm sure they'll be just fine. When the storm passes, I'll head up there and check on them, just to make sure. He flicked his eyes to the man again and then locked them with mine with a surprising intensity, like he was trying to tell me something with his gaze alone. He lowered his voice and said, the campers, they were all wearing very good clothing. Sophia's brother is a climber in some very cold regions and she recognized the campers' gear as similar to what he uses. Even better news, then, I started, but Martin cut me off. Exactly like the pants that man is wearing now, he said quietly. I looked over at the man again, once again taking note of his hodgepodge combination of clothing. The gloves he still wore looked to be thin and ill-suited to the winter weather, but looked well-made and would have been fine for a mild autumn outing. He still hadn't moved or said anything, and his emotionless eyes drifted slowly across the Spaniards with what seemed to my growing paranoia like a hungry interest. It was almost like he was inventorying them, evaluating them, somehow. Once again, that tickle in the back of my brain, telling me something was not quite right with the man. Something was just a little out of place, but I still couldn't figure it out. It set my teeth on edge. I looked back at Martin. Are you sure? He shrugged. As sure as we can be. Sophia says she is certain, but the rest of us do not have the experience to recognize these details as well as her. Was this man with them? I asked, but I already knew the answer. Martin shook his head. No. I have never seen him before now. He leaned in a little closer and lowered his voice. This man, there is something, he said, trailing off, unable to find the right words. I nodded. I know. I feel it, too. I walked back to my desk and opened a drawer, retrieving the holstered handgun and attaching it to my belt. The spare magazine went into my pocket, and I grabbed my heavy jacket from a nearby hook and pulled my fur-lined hat over my ears. Martin followed me, watching with interest. I looked over his shoulder, making sure we were out of sight and earshot of the bunk room. I'm going to check on the camp. Have you ever handled a shotgun? I asked. He nodded. I hunt pheasant with my cousins every year. I am a very good shot. Good, I said. That doorway beside my desk is my room. Right inside you'll find a 12-gauge pump, loaded but not chambered. If you need it. He just gave a silent duck of his head. I should be back within the hour. I know the place you're talking about. Keep him here until I return, but don't do anything if you don't have to, I said, closing my coat and making sure the zippered slit covering my holster was open and accessible. Be careful, Jackson Turner. I feel some darkness in the air. I just gave a tight-lipped nod before opening the door and stepping out into the wind. The icy chill hit me immediately, cutting through my heavy pants and finding its way through every little opening in my clothing. The wind out here was a constant buffeting and howled in my ears. The snow along the trail was only a little over ankle deep, but tugged at my boots with every step, slowing my progress. The area that Martin had described was one of the few marked campsites along this area of the trail, and though it wasn't strictly required for campers to check in before setting up, it was highly encouraged. This deep in the woods, 20 miles away from the nearest town, the only real lifeline that anyone had were the rangers. If anything went wrong out here, the fact that you registered with the local ranger station may very well mean the difference between life and death. That didn't mean that everyone followed that rule, though. Most of the time, it was new campers, those folks lacking some of the wisdom of experience, that didn't know or didn't think it necessary to check in before setting camp. Sometimes, it was the opposite. Some highly experienced outdoors folks felt that there was no need, that they could handle anything that came their way. Either way, as I followed that northern trail, a growing unease began to color my steps. I felt the tight grip of anxiousness tickling my every breath. I didn't know what I was going to find. If I was lucky, I'd find 3 cold weather, double wall, silicone nylon tents, with their occupants snuggled warmly and safely within. If that was the case, I'd just check on them and turn back to my station, hopefully before the worst of the storm began in earnest. If not, well, I'd have to figure that out when it came. Asterisk. A half hour later, I reached the campsite. Or, at least, what was left of it. The remains of what were obviously 3 high-quality winter tents were positioned compactly around a central fire pit, their bright red material shredded and torn and flapping violently in the fierce wind, looking very much like a lunatic array of flags in the heart of a hurricane. I pulled the ears of my hat lower, adjusting the chinstrap tighter. "Hello," I shouted, straining to make my voice carry above the wind. Even with all my force, it still sounded pathetically impotent in the roar of the coming storm. "Is anyone here?" I waited a long moment, but could hear nothing but the rush of wind and the whip-like snapping of the nylon fabric. The campsite had all the hallmarks of a bear attack, except I hadn't seen a bear in months, and we'd never had a bear attack in this area that I'd ever heard of. It wasn't like the forests out west, we didn't have brown bears here. Black bears, yeah, but they were smaller and nowhere near as aggressive as big browns. Sure, they could be dangerous, especially if startled or threatened, but they didn't actively hunt humans. I took a few more steps forward into the campsite, drawing the Sig Sauer 10mm and holding it at low ready as I performed a quick visual of the tents. Nothing. No signs of bodies, blood, a struggle, anything at all. Just destroyed tents that could have been abandoned by the campers when the wind started getting bad and the fabric started to fail. And then it caught my eye. A flash of dark gray, partially hidden by the snow between 2 of the tents. Another 10 minutes of snowfall and I'd have never seen it. Moving closer, I towed the frozen bundle of cloth, overturning it before picking it up with my free hand, keeping the Sig at the ready. It was a pair of thick winter pants, old and torn and covered in dark red-brown stains that looked too fresh for my comfort. They were fur-lined and looked to be woolen. As soon as I lifted them free of the snow, the wind blew a familiar musky smell into my face, and I dropped them in revulsion. Another 2 feet beyond, the hint of blue in the white drift drew my attention, and I cautiously approached. I recognized the puffy material of a cold-weather jacket, and when I reached out to expose more of it, I staggered backwards in shock, realizing suddenly that I was looking at a crudely dismembered arm, still wrapped snugly in its warm jacket sleeve. I cursed aloud and stumbled backwards, tripping over the stones surrounding the fire pit and falling hard on my ass, eyes wide and not even registering the pain of my tailbone meeting the frozen ground. I sat there, hyperventilating, for what felt like minutes, long enough that the frigid chill was settling into my legs and backside from where I sat dumbly in the snow, eyes wide and breath ragged. It was only when my arms began to shake that I realized I was gripping the handgun as tightly as I could, aimed insanely at the gray mass of frozen trousers on the ground before me as if they were going to suddenly spring to life and attack. "Shit," was all I could think to say as rationality suddenly returned, clearing the pulsating red spots from my vision and slamming my thoughts back to the present jarringly. The pounding in my ears began to lessen, replaced once again with the unrelenting wail of the wind. I leapt to my feet and started running back along the trail, back to my station, where Martin and Lucas and Diego and Sophia and the other girl, whose name I couldn't remember, sheltered from the coming storm with. With what? Was he some sort of psycho serial killer, stalking the lonely hiking trails of upstate New York? That didn't make any sense. I'd been here for 3 years and never heard of anything like this. As I ran clumsily through the snow, which was now halfway up my shin, I thought back to those gray pants, discarded in the campsite. They had been shredded, not just torn and ripped from age and wear. It had been something violent that caused the damage, and the blood stains seemed to lend credence to that theory. So, whatever had happened, the stranger had decided to replace his damaged and stained pants with those of his victims. And then I thought about how none of his clothes matched, and how his boots and gloves weren't even suitable for winter weather. How long had this been going on? 20 minutes later, the dim yellow lights from the windows of my station appeared suddenly from the nearly whiteout conditions that had overtaken me with the full coming of the storm. The temperature had dropped even more, and I was amazed that I had been able to keep up my pace long enough to make it back, driven by adrenaline and fear. I slowed to a halt before my ranger station, noticing immediately how the front door hung open a few inches. My mind urged me forward, to go racing in, but I had to take a few moments to catch my breath and let my racing heart slow a bit before I entered. I couldn't understand why the door was only open a few finger widths. If it hadn't been locked, the first strong gust of wind would have blown it fully open and sent it banging against the wood paneling of the wall behind it. But what occupied my thoughts far more was the implication of that open door. There's no way it could have been missed by anyone within, and nobody in their right mind would have sat in the station while the freezing wind and snow blew in through the open doorway. I pushed that door aside and crept as quietly as possible to the door, pushing it gently at first, then with greater force as I felt some resistance holding it closed. I gripped my sidearm tightly, muzzle directly forward and at chest level, finger resting along the frame of the pistol and ready to drop to the trigger and go to work in a moment's notice. The door gradually gave way and pushed inward far enough that I was able to slide through the gap, the howling of the wind and the protesting of the building blessedly providing enough cacophony to cover the sounds of my entrance. As soon as I stepped inside, I found myself in the center of a fever nightmare. A body lay behind the door and had served as an impromptu barricade. I could only tell that it was one of the women by the delicate shape of the body, as the head and upper torso had been savagely mutilated, the skin and scalp torn away from the red white of the skull viciously, presumably while she had desperately tried to make her escape from whatever hell had pursued her. Blood slicked nearly every surface around me, hot and stinking of copper, and I became aware of a wet, tearing sound emanating from the bunk room. The lights in that room were flickering chaotically, the hanging bulb in the center of the room swinging maniacally, as if it had been recently struck and was still settling its pendulum motion. As quietly as I could, I ducked around the doorway into the room, fresh shock coursing through my body in a cold wash that threatened my consciousness. Bodies and pieces of bodies lay strewn about the room haphazardly, most still enshrouded in bits of clothing, now tacked in place by sticky crimson. I could feel the heat in the room from whatever horrifying act of violence had occurred, from the bodies that now lay scattered about like discarded playthings. At my feet, I noted a handful of empty shotgun shells, where they had fallen and been arrested by the viscous gore that painted the wooden floorboards. The shotgun lay nearby, chamber open and magazine tube empty, only inches away from the barely recognizable remains of the man I'd known as Martin. Terrible slashes and wounds covered his ravaged corpse, looking as if he'd been thrown into a shredder. His limbs were outstretched and only attached by the yellowish tendons and pink muscles which now lay open and exposed. My eyes were drawn at that moment to the source of the sounds I'd heard before, and I saw the crouched form of the stranger straddling one of the bodies, Lucas, I think, by the bright yellow of his North Face jacket. I watched in horror as the stranger dipped his head again and again, jerking it savagely each time it came away, as if tearing away more bits of meat with each movement. I noticed then that the stranger's hands had somehow grown, elongated, and taken on a shiny chitinous appearance that left the fingers as jagged and gore-encrusted claws. After only a moment's shocked hesitation, My reflexes took over and I snapped the muzzle of my handgun up and squeezed the trigger. I know that the thunderous blasts of the 10mm must have been deafening, but I barely registered it as I watched blackened holes appear in the thing's back. It threw its head back in what I can only hope was pain and cried out in a shrieking screech that drowned out all else. I squeezed the trigger again, and another bullet punched its way through the horrifying thing. Suddenly, almost faster than I could track, the stranger exploded up from where it had been feasting and lit upon the wall, its terrible claws sinking into the wood and holding it in place as it turned its head 180 degrees to face me. The eyes had turned completely black and grown to the size of golf balls, and the jaw looked almost to have disjointed from its skull, the skin at the corners of its mouth drawn back in a hideous grin that stretched nearly from ear to ear, exposing a mouth full of shark-like triangular teeth, now stained bright red. It tensed, and an instant later it had leapt to the next wall, gripping the exposed wood like some monstrous insect, eyes fixed upon me. Before it could make another move, I fired again and again and again, my panic-induced attack miraculously finding purchase more often than not as empty brass cases ejected against the doorframe next to me, ringing out like death bells. Then there was a long moment of silent stillness in the room, and its black eyes were fixed on me, still unnervingly cold and alien. I tensed, waiting for the thing to pounce towards me, but it was clear I'd heard it. I don't know how badly, but black ichor dripped from the half-dozen wounds punched by my hollow points, and I thought I heard a sickly rattling in its slow, deep breaths. With a final ear-splitting, otherworldly shriek, it leapt again, this time away from me and through the window at the rear of the room. The glass shattered outward, and then it was over. I stood alone in this charnel house, left only with the remains of the 5 Spanish tourists and the disconcerting awareness that the slide of my handgun was locked back, smoke lazily drifting from the barrel and the magazine now empty. Asterisk. That was almost a year ago, and I've since transferred from field operations to an administrative position within the Park Service. My office is located in the middle of a city, surrounded by people and without a lonely forest or dark wilderness in sight. After the investigation died down and the deaths were ruled as animal predation, I tried to return to my posting, but I just couldn't do it. They tore down the old station and built a new one closer to the trailhead, and I thought I could get past it, but I kept seeing that stranger, that creature, every time I closed my eyes. A few times in the dark stillness of the night, I thought I could hear that banshee wail echoing in the distance. Once or twice, I think I heard more than one. I slept with my handgun on the nightstand and the shotgun propped next to my bed, and kept the doors locked at all times. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there. Maybe searching for me. Maybe it needed to make sure that I wasn't able to tell anyone about it. You see, in the time since that horrible night, I've scoured the internet for any possible explanation for what I saw. I consulted any self-proclaimed cryptozoologist or paranormal investigator that would speak to me, but nobody had any rational explanations beyond fairy tales and urban legends, and invariably I was left with as many questions as I started with. And then I tripped across an article one day that changed everything for me. It was a piece written about something called the Uncanny Valley, an idea put forth by some Japanese roboticist back in the 70s. At first, I almost passed it over, since it seemed mostly to relate to robots and computer graphics and how people feel increasingly uncomfortable the more realistically human they appear. But then I read a theory about why people may react this way and how it may be an evolutionary artifact left over in the dark corners of our reptilian brains. About how, at some point in our distant shared racial history, there may have actually been predators that looked almost human. They may have appeared so close to our ancestors that they were able to blend in with us almost perfectly. According to the theory, primitive humans may have developed a keen sense of facial recognition as a survival mechanism. This may have been passed down through genetic memories, fading just a little with each generation until today, where it existed as little more than an instinctive warning when we looked at someone who wasn't quite right. Someone who seemed almost normal, but perhaps with the slightest of imperfections that made them seem just a little wrong. Someone that our instincts told us didn't belong, someone who wasn't really one of us at all. I wondered if these things have been with us all along, hiding among us, stalking us from within our own numbers. Yesterday, on my commute to the office, I noticed a young woman sitting by herself in the back of the subway car. Even though it was crowded, the seats beside her were empty, and I noticed that the other commuters almost seemed to be avoiding getting too close to her. I don't think anyone really realized it, but people kept glancing uneasily at her out of the corners of their eyes. There was nothing overtly out of place with her, and it could have just been happenstance that nobody had elected to sit down next to her. I just couldn't shake the feeling, though, that something just felt off. 7th story. This story was shared by you/insomniac_writer. If you see a structure in the woods, leave it alone. Hello everyone, Jethro here. I'm still in Paris, but not for long. In a few days I'll be back home together with Molly. But I'm not writing this to tell you about my romanticism with Molly, I'm here to tell you how I met that asshole. As you know, well if you didn't you will now, I'm a hunter for the paranormal, demons, cryptids, and all the other ingredients that form this shit soup, my life. I get contracts from people around the globe, hunt this, we'll discuss the pay afterwards, or, I think I accidentally summoned a demon, I need help. How you accidentally summon one of Satan's slaves is beyond my thinking, but some people are, apparently, dumb enough to do that. How do I get the contracts you ask? Well, through a site on the deep web, it's pretty hidden, but not impossible to find, and I take care of unwanted guests, so it's probably the safest space on the platform. This site also led to my unwanted friendship with Azaf. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wax fixing some looks on my site, to make it more aesthetic, as if anyone cared. My computer made a ding sound. I looked in the bottom left corner and sure enough, a chat box was there. Hello Jethro, name's Azaf, I heard a lot about you, especially that you are very talented in paranormal shit, so I decided this was the best place to come. I need help regarding a stone formation. Doesn't sound bad, I know, but bear with me. Last week it wasn't here, 2 days ago it was. It also came packed with some hooded figures that always sit in the middle, and I don't like uninvited guests on my property. I also work in the same range as you, but I'm afraid that if those hooded things attack I won't be able to kill them alone, so I want you to help me take care of them. I'll attach a link below to my location, we'll discuss more here. I hope you get back to me soon. How charming, I thought, my name's circulating around. I was doubting pressing the link he sent me, what if it was a virus, or a DDoS attack, IP tracker, there were many possibilities. But my instinct told me it's fine, and I'd be damned if I didn't listen to the voice that saved me millions of times before. I opened the link. It went straight to an image satellite view from Google Maps. The location was a national park, I've visited there before, beautiful scenery combined with fresh air feels good to have once in a while. Knowing he wanted me to get there as soon as possible, I decided to sleep that night and pack up in the morning. I replied to his message with a quick, "I'll be over soon," before closing my laptop. I woke up at 7 sharp, and made myself some coffee. The trip was 3 hours away, I'll surely need some. I packed up everything I needed, got in my Ford truck and drove to Azaf. The drive was peaceful, the roads pretty empty since it was so early in the morning. I admired the trees I was passing by while listening to old rock music. I finally got there, starving. Someone was already waiting for me. "You Jethro?" asked the man without missing a beat. He looked stressed. He wasn't very tall, 5 feet 7 inches, but was very well built. He had a scar on his left side of his face. His hair, a messy black tar color, was waving in the wind. His face was freshly shaved and some perfume from his body was picked in the wind's dance. Yeah, you Azaf? I responded the same way he asked. He nodded and handed me his hand, waiting for a shake. I took it firmly and gave a small smile. Come, let's get to my cabin, we'll discuss there. He signaled for me to follow him as he already was making way to the dirt path. He sure isn't wasting any time, I mumbled to myself. I stood my place for a quick second. I forgot my weapons. I ran to the back side of my car, grabbed my bags and decided to take out my revolver, just in case. We walked on the path for about 10 minutes before he went off it. Just a little more, he said looking back at me. He saw the gun. We reached a small wooden cabin that seemed so out of place, in the middle of the tall bark trees. Next to the cabin were some cut logs, held in place by thick, weathered, ropes. We went inside, a fireplace was dimly burning some wood, next to it more, small cut logs, laid waiting for their demise. It was cozy. There was also a bookshelf, full of books, mostly classic and old, but there were some new ones, next to it a couch. Perfect length from the fireplace to keep you warm but also not burn you. On the left side was a bed where, I guessed, Azaf slept. The bed was made from more logs, refined and oiled so they looked shiny and fine. You want a drink? Asked Azaf before pulling out a half-empty bottle of scotch. Too early for me, I replied, kindly denying his offer, but I'm starving if you have some food. Oh sure. He replied, going to the freezer and pulling out some frozen, round pre-cooked beef. He placed 2 pieces on a porcelain plate, setting it next to the fire. While those warm up, let's talk about the situation. Suggested Azaf with a warm and kind tone. For a man doing my job he sure was cheerful. Tell me about it. I said, agreeing with what he said. Well, I was chilling in my cabin early morning about a week or so ago. I have a few morning folks who like to take walks through here. It's safe and the morning fresh air makes for a good waker. I got a knock to my door, followed by 2 more. It was one of the men who walks here. I welcomed him in, asking what's up. He told me that the stone formation I built was pretty damn good and just wanted to come congratulate me. I looked at him with an eyebrow raised before asking dash. He stopped his tail before getting up, going to the beef. It was warm now. He placed the 2 beef on 2 round buns that already had cheese on them and handed them to me. Hamburgers, neat. I thought while starting to chomp down on them like a hungry dog. I was a hungry dog. He continued, while sipping his scotch from time to time, keeping his red lips moist. Like I was saying, I asked him about the stone formations he was talking about since I knew well I didn't build any, neither was I a sleepwalker architect. He looked at me, confused, before telling me to come with him. We walked for about half an hour before reaching them. Sure enough, tall stone pillars, like the Stonehenge formation, stood in the woods, rising up from the ground, looking like they were always there. I was even more confused now, wondering how they appeared there. He chuckled proudly at the fact that he was right and I was wrong, but my stomach started to turn for some reason. Something was wrong about them. Where they stood nothing got close, no animals, no vegetation, it was just the ground's forest circling this weird structure. I got closer to it. My knees felt melty, I barely could walk. My hands were floppy, it somehow weakened me. I went back to the folk as fast as I could and told him to get out of here. His proud expression turned to fear. He knew I was serious when I started yelling. He went home and I closed the park following the next second. Ever since then I kept an eye on them. Sometimes I hear mumbling, like someone singing some type of song, but the noise comes from seemingly thin air. I decided to reach out to you when the hoods first appeared. He finished the story as I finished my food. It was good. I stared to the floor, my mind trying to figure out what was going on from what he told me. I finally got an idea. Do the hoods appear only during the night? Yeah. Alright then, can we go to the formation now? I asked him. His eyes changed, a worry look was written in them, but he agreed nonetheless. Sure, just don't get too close. I know what I'm doing, don't worry. I told him with a chuckle. He was dead serious, my chuckle slowly dying in his piercing stare. We walked for 30 minutes, as he said, before we reached them. I stared at them for a second before being interrupted by Azaf. What do you think? The same look of concern plastered on his face. I can't tell much if I don't get close. Also, you didn't mention the candles that are around the middle of this thing. What candles? He said before looking closer. He indeed saw what I've seen. Small red candles were placed tidy around the structure and around the middle. His face said it all. Can I get closer? I asked him, breaking his chain of thoughts. It's your funeral. He said. Grim way of saying yes, I thought. As I got closer I felt everything slow down. Air, motion, sounds. Indeed, it was weakening me, not enough to kneel me down but enough to slow me. It was like gravity got heavier. I got to the middle of it and looked around the stone pillars. They looked like polished stone, no cracks, no signs of being weathered. On their sides were symbols going from top to the bottom. Only once have I seen them. They were demonic symbols. Their roles are, as you expected, to help summon hellish creatures or portals. Last time I saw one of these it didn't turn out exactly good. I turned back to go to Azaf but something stopped me. Leave while you can. Came a hushed and raspy whisper. It didn't sound like Azaf. I looked around, confused, for its source but all I found was the forest and the confused look of Azaf. What are you looking for? Something whispered to me. I told him, signaling him to be quiet. He didn't speak for a second but when he saw I couldn't find anything he said, quietly, do you remember the sounds without a source? I did remember, and it wasn't a good sign. Something made its home in the structure and it didn't like visitors. What did it whisper to you? He asked, curiously. Leave while you can. What the hell? He asked, fear starting to build in him. There were also symbols, demonic, carved in the stone. My guess? We're dealing with hell worshippers. I told him. His eyes widened and his face turned pale. Don't you mean Satan worshippers? His words stumbled. Those are different, they only worship Satan. These one are trying to summon a portal or hellish creatures, and usually people die when that happens. I informed him, all the joy that was in him left. How do we deal with them? We need to wait till it's night, so they come to worship, summon, whatever. We attack them, leave no survivors. They don't know that we know about them, do they? I asked, glaring at him. Nah man, I've been looking at them from a distance. He responded without missing a beat. Perfect, we hide somewhere near here, prepare our guns and ambush them. Sounds like a plan. He reassured me. For how scared he seemed, he sure as hell was brave. Night came quickly upon us but we were ready. Out of nowhere they came. They were 5, hoods up, covering their facial features. They didn't look old nor young. Judging from their clothes they were 20 to 30. After looking around, most likely making sure nobody was spying on them, they sat down in a circle around the middle. They started holding hands while bowing their heads down. This was the time to attack. I looked at Azaf, meeting his cold glare. Ready? I whispered to him. Ready as I'll ever be, he whispered back, although he tried to hide it, fear creeped on his words. We got up, tiptoeing closer until we had a clear view of our targets. All hell broke loose. Azaf blasted the head of one of the hooded things, making its limp body hit the ground with a thud. The others looked up at us. For the first time we saw their faces. They weren't human. Their faces were mutilated. Empty black voids looking at us, consuming our souls. Their faces were pale, no color could be seen on them. Their mouth opened sideways, rows of small, jagged teeth ready for flesh. Their ears were slit, with strange symbols marked on them like they were marked on the rest of their face. "What the hell are these things, man?" shouted Azaf at me, fear overwhelming him. "I have as much of a fucking idea as you do." I yelled back, "We need to stay calm, don't let them get through you." "Harder than it sounds," he said, his voice now trembling. Was he about to cry? I wondered to myself. They hissed at us for a few seconds before attacking. They were fast, too fucking fast. They took advantage of the trees, climbing on them to pounce from above. I managed to shoot one in mid-air with my shotgun. Only 3 were left, Azaf managing to kill another one shortly. Although they were fast and damn fucking ugly, they weren't very resilient. Little did we know the worst is about to come. Before killing the last 2, one of them hissed at us again, this time it was intelligible. "We told both of you to leave, now you'll burn in hell." The thing started laughing hysterically. The second one started saying some sort of chant. At first the words sounded normal, but as the chant went longer it got considerably faster. Its eyes turned into their sockets, now bleeding red liquid, as it started floating. Strange, visible, energy was circling him in an endless loop. Me and Azaf couldn't help but glare at the scene. We were mortified, frozen in place. Our bodies refusing to do anything. In the background the first creature kept repeating, "Yes. Yes. We're going home. We're going home." The creature was, now, around 10 feet from the ground while suddenly everything stopped. Sounds, movement, gravity, blood flow. The demon fell down, hitting the ground hard, bone cracking coming from its body. We expected it to be dead, it wasn't. A few seconds later some sort of portal opened. We could only see fire inside it. The sound that came from it was worse. Millions upon millions of tortured screams shrieked in a painful symphony. My ears were hurting. I looked at Azaf, he was trying to cover his ears too, but that didn't work. The sound was too strong. We were fucked unless we did something. We did the only thing we could do, shoot at the portal as much as we could. The bullets were landing but they were going inside. We remembered the 2 creatures. The first one was still laughing. I put a shot in its eyes, "Fuck you asshole." Azaf was about to do the same to the second one but it got up. It floated again, only now it was even less human than before. As it floated, arms thrown wide, in AT pose, it started blabbering something. Another fucking chant. I yelled annoyed. I looked at Azaf. His gaze met mine. Something was wrong. The creature suddenly stopped and when it did, Azaf shot at me, barely missing me. "What the fuck are you doing?" I roared, tears starting to form uncontrollably in my eyes. "You're going to die for your sins, you mortal pleb," yelled Azaf back. Then it clicked. The demon took control of Azaf's mind, making him try to kill me. I couldn't bring myself to shoot him for some reason. He was still a human inside. I needed to kill the creature. My task only got harder when from the portal 2 skinwalkers and 2 wendigos came. "Oh, give me a fucking break, will you?" I shouted at the creature. Deep down I really wanted it to give me a break. The thing only laughed at me, staring at me, its stare saying, "See you in hell, idiot." The demon went to the portal, closing it. It was me versus everything. I checked my ammo bag, thank God I always bring more than I expect is needed. The Wendigos pounced at the same time. Their smell of decay and death hitting my nose like a fire truck. I barely managed to dodge before the skinwalkers followed them. One of the walkers threw me to the ground, luckily I had a tight grip on my shotgun. I shot 2 rounds in the ground while trying to aim at them. I managed to do it and I shot one of the skinwalkers straight in its face, making it flop to the ground, its face turning to a fleshy and bloody mush. The others shrieked angrily. My friend snuck behind me, shooting at me. Motherfucker hit my shoulder, but luckily it wasn't with the shotgun he had. It was with his pistol. I don't know what he did to the shotgun. I squealed in pain, shoving him to the ground. I'm not gonna kill you, asshole. I squeaked at him before I got thrown into a tree by a Wendigo. My shotgun fell to the ground, but luckily I managed to flip my rifle from behind, fully auto-ing the Wendigo's body. He fell on top of me. Its weight felt like crushing my bones. I finally managed to shove it away from me. I looked up, seeing the demon laughing while applauding. He was toying with me, this was a theater play to him. I shot at the demon but he flew past the bullets, raising a finger up and moving it to the sides in a no motion. Azaf got up and shot at me but my adrenaline and fear allowed me to use the Wendigo carcass as a shield, throwing it on him after he stopped shooting. This would give me enough time to deal with the creatures. The skinwalker rushed at me like an angry bull. I just got away, making it hit a tree. The tree made a loud breaking sound, its leaves hushing from the shock. It hit the tree so hard it fell on him. The hellish creature looked back at me, hunger written all over its eyes. It shrieked loudly, trying to get the tree off, but it didn't have time as I got my revolver and emptying 6 silver bullets in his head. How the fuck am I alive? I mumbled to myself, trying to breathe. I managed to catch my breath. The Wendigo sat still. The demon must have been controlling it as well. He wanted his show to go on a little longer. Alright, you stupid asshole. Let's make a deal. I tried pleading to the demon through heavy breaths. Surprisingly, he looked interested in my words. A low growl came from his mouth. Go on. If I manage to kill your last pet, I said, pointing to the Wendigo, you leave my friend alone, giving him back his mind. After that, me and you will fight. If you win, you can have my soul. If I win, you die. He stared at me for a second, contemplating the offer. Do you think a mortal like you can kill me? Those silver bullets you have won't do much to me. He was right, a demon, his tear was almost immune to silver bullets. But I had other ammunition that he didn't know of. Well, it's the only fucking chance I have for me and my friend to leave this place alive, right? He smiled at me, basically answering my question. Alright, you put a good show for me, so I'll give you this one chance. Thank God, I said to myself. I went to grab my shotgun, reloading it. I contemplated shooting directly at him, but I decided against it. When I was done preparing, I looked at the thing, nodding. The demon kept my friend standing still in the air, next to him. I looked at my shoulder, hoping the adrenaline would get me through the pain. The thing released the Wendigo. The hungry pest wasted no time pouncing at me. The ground shook as he ran after me. He was strong. I slid on the ground, him jumping over me. I turned back to him and shot 2 times. One hitting his chest and one missing. Come on, Jethro, concentrate. I mumbled. The demon was smiling, thinking I'm done for. Me and the creature started going in a circle, both of us waiting for one of us to make a move. The Wendigo fake charged at me, making me shoot again. The gun was made for close range and we were mid-range, so I missed. He charged again, for real this time, but I managed to dodge. "Alright you dirty bastard, if that's how you wanna play, that's how we'll play," I yelled at the thing, throwing my shotgun to the ground and grabbing my rifle. I didn't waste any more time, I was done playing games. I started blasting at it. Before the Wendigo even had a chance to react, his body was full of holes. It looked like a shitty puppet when I was done. It fell to the ground, its last stare giving me a chill. The demon looked at me. For the first time I could see a trace of emotion. He was impressed. "A deal is a deal." I yelled at him, pointing towards Azaf. He shrugged at me before putting him down. "I won't give him back his mind. If you kill me he turns to normal anyways, plus I don't want him attacking me." The demon told me, a wide smile on his face. "Fine, just put him down, let's get this over with." I told the demon, trying to sound brave. Truth is, I was tired, so fucking tired. And the pain of my bruises and wounds started to creep all at once, my adrenaline barely keeping them in its lead. As the demon was letting Azaf down, I loaded silver bullets blessed by an actual angel. Again, a story for another time. I didn't have many, but I believed enough to take the demon down. As I got ready, so did the demon. He attacked. He was ruthless, its claws moving quick, swiping from side to side. It almost ripped one of my arms off, but I managed to stumble out its way, getting some distance. It was no use. The pain overtook me. I laid, sitting down on the cold, hard forest ground, leaning on a tree. "Any last words, mortal?" asked the demon, sick excitement leaving mouth. "Yeah dash." I paused to catch my breath. "Die you asshole." I finally muttered out, bracing for the impact. The demon looked at me confused before bringing his clawed hands upwards in a swift motion. It didn't have time to finish. As I was laying there, helpless, I heard a yelling from behind the demon before the gunshots accompanied it. It was Azaf. He rushed to my side, but I didn't hear what he said since I passed out. I woke up at the hospital, apparently 2 days later. That's what Azaf told me anyway. I stood in the hospital for a few more months before I recovered. I had a broken arm, a broken ankle, and my back was badly damaged, barely not reaching my spine. The official cause was that me and Azaf were cutting down trees. One fell on me. As for the gunshot wound, I bribed the staff with $5,000, since they needed some new equipment anyways. When I was finally let out, Azaf invited me to his new place. He sold the property and moved further inside the city. "Hey man, come inside," said Azaf, moving from the way, opening the door fully. His new apartment was pretty big but also cozy. He sat me on the couch in front of a glass table. A wide flat screen TV was attached to the wall across the couch. "How have you been?" he asked me, looking me up and down, noticing the scar that the bullet left in my skin. "Well, other than sitting in that boring hospital for months, I can't complain," I said with a chuckle. "No kidding, I don't know how you're alive after what you told me happened." "What can I say, I'm a tough asshole," I replied, keeping the bright mood. His eyes fixed on me, they got a little dark, making me worry. "Also sorry for, trying to kill you," he said. He was honest. His words were warm and came with a stutter. "Well, that wasn't you, so don't worry about it," I said, reassuring him that it's all right. He truly felt sorry. "So you sold the national park?" I finally asked. "Yeah, after what happened in those woods, I never want to go back there or in a forest," he said, the regret of selling it was written on his face. "You gotta do what you gotta do," I said. He smiled before saying, "I guess." "Oh yeah, since you're so tough we should team up," he said. I knew this was coming. Yeah, it'll be cool, but I work alone. I said, denying his offer. Ah, bummer, guess this is where we part ways then, but you owe me for saving you. He said, a grin forming on his face. I can't complain, I guess, I do owe you. I said, a little annoyed, but what was I supposed to say? How did you save me anyways? Oh right, you blacked out. The demon was so concentrated on you, on his pride, his victory, that the spell or whatever he had on me became weak. I somehow managed to snap from it. I took your rifle, it was on the ground next to the demon, he didn't see me. I blasted the rifle at its head. It collapsed on the ground after a few shots. I don't know what bullets you had in it, but they did wonders. I got you in my car and rushed to the hospital. Jesus Christ, well thank you man. I said looking at him. For the first time since we met I didn't see him as an asshole. He took a pause, contemplating what to say next. He finally spoke. Great, well I'll contact you when I need your help. He said, walking with me to the door. See you then. I said, exiting the apartment, heading home. I took a break for a month. I still needed my mental health to come back, plus I didn't get much sleep in the hospital. Right when my month ended, Asaf contacted me about the house I told you about.